Podcast, take one.
The JadEd podcast, take one.
Testing, 1, 2, fucking 3. Welcome to the JadEd podcast. My name is Jad,
My name is Ed.
and we are going to talk about some social issues today that we are seeing in society, like school and marriage and all of these fun things. Ed?
Yeah. So first off, we're gonna tell you about how we got the name JadEd podcast.
JadEd, yes, of course,
Yes.
of course.
So he's Jad, I'm Ed.
Yes.
JadEd. We're sick of society. We're bored of society.
We are jaded of society, my friend. That's why we are doing this podcast. Yes.
Yes. And that's basically all you need to know about us, because we are very simple people.
Yeah. So let's start with. So I just graduated, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you, mate. Like about 2 weeks ago, right?
Yep.
And I graduated a bit late, just a tad. Took me 10 years. But
So it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's a marathon. Exactly. Life is a marathon. Exactly. So I noticed something that when I was 20, I was stupid, right? But I wasn't as stupid as the kids nowadays. Because like I look at them, they can't keep eye contact. They just can't keep eye contact with you. It's fucking, it's hilarious. I'm like, dude, look at me. You want to talk to me? Look into my eyes and talk to me. Don't like, they just look away and they're like, dude, look at me. And like we're having a conversation.
So this could be because of a couple of reasons, right? Like, the first one is their constant addiction to their phones and social media.
Oh, it's all the parents, mate. It's all the parents' fault.
We have to explore all the options.
Of
right?
course.
So
Who gives them these like I've been actually speaking on this topic. I was talking to my cousin today, and I was like, like people, they don't know how to be parents anymore. Because I was sitting in a restaurant the other day, and there was this kid who was just throwing a tantrum, right? He's bored, right? He's a kid, a 3-year-old kid, and his mom is like, "Hey, take the phone and just shut the fuck up." I was like, "What the fuck?" Well, she didn't say shut the fuck up, but like she gave her kid the phone, and she's like, "Halan, just leave." I'm like, that's not a good way to parent.
it's not, and it's just the lazy way of parenting, right? Because the parents can't really be bothered to do actual parenting, so they give their kid any form of technology that will keep them busy. It's like even back in the 70s, right? When their only form of entertainment was television. The parents would be like, sit in front of babysitter television.
Well, it's gotten worse though, because right now, like the kids are addicted to the phone, but their parents are addicted to the phone too. Like back in when I grew up, when I was 10, 12 years old, the phone wasn't really like a mainstream thing. Like only the rich people had it. Like maybe you knew 2 or 3 people who had a phone. I'm talking like 20
How old were you here?
I'm talking like 20 years ago.
Okay.
So I was like 7 or 8, right? And then my dad got his first phone. But I remember when he got his first phone, he got that Nokia with like, it wasn't like it wasn't even a smartphone. It was a feature phone, right? You couldn't do anything on it. You could just take notes maybe, or like have a couple of calls. There was no Facebook. Well, actually there was, but not on these phones. There was no Instagram. Nothing that just stimulated your brain all the time.
It's all the dopamine hits that these
Exactly. Yes.
devices give you, right? Because
Dopamine.
if the parents are getting addicted due to the dopamine, and then the kids, their brains are, I don't like using this word, but they're a bit more fragile than the parents' brains.
They're
And-
more spongy.
Exactly. Okay. Let's call it spongy. So the kids' brains are more spongy. So if you inject a lot of dopamine into these spongy brains, then they're gonna develop some form of dependency. And I use the word dependency because I don't want to use the word addiction when I'm talking to children.
No,
about
you could.
children.
It is addiction. It's addiction. Kids get addicted to video games and to porn and to everything.
No, that I agree with. And all of these are because of you don't need to work to get your dopamine hits anymore. You can literally open up your phone, go to a website, watch a few things, your dopamine gets up, then you put your phone away. But that would be in an ideal situation where you can just put the phone away whenever you want. However, what you're seeing is people
can't.
constantly keeping up their dopamine levels
It's
at higher rates than your biology allows.
All right, so who do you blame here? Do you blame the people who don't know how to control, or do you blame the companies behind these apps and stuff that make it that just fucking they fuse the algorithm in a way that they just grab you by the balls and they just refuse to let go, you know?
Oof, who's to blame is that's a really
Like
overarching question.
we don't have like they don't check your watch hours. Like I have this thing on YouTube, right? Where I tell the app, hey, can you remind me after it's been an hour and I've been watching like an idiot for an hour, and it tells me, hey, maybe it's time to take a break. Now I had to do that myself. It didn't like come with the app, right? I had to go into the settings and say, hey, after an hour, remind me to go take a break, do something else, do something productive with my life, right? I
Yeah.
had to actually add that myself. But these days, it's like, no, you're just on the phone all the time. Even my parents, right? They're just on the phone all the time. I'm like, like go out, do something, right? Like life is right here. Why? And that's a pretty sick future. It's scary.
Listen, I'm not gonna sit here and preach correct behavior because I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure our viewers and
Oh,
listeners are
I've been
also
guilty of
guilty
this
of
too.
this.
I've been guilty of this too. Yeah, of
Right?
course.
Because
I still am sometimes.
it's just a much easier way to get your dopamine hit than to go outside, and because biologically we search for dopamine, this makes sense on a biological level. However, it doesn't make sense on a social level until the introduction of social media, which gives you a pseudo society within
Yeah.
your phone, and that's where I think a lot of the problem lies.
Like yeah, back in the day, you wanted to do something, you know, you had to go down to the neighbor's house, and he's like, "Hey, are you busy or are you not?" And it's like his mom would tell you, "Hey, fuck off, my son's not here," you know, stuff like that. When nowadays you can just pick up your phone and just chat with someone.
Yeah, it's it. I don't know where to point the finger right now because
Oh, I
it's
think
not the fault of the parents
I
solely.
I do think it is. Because let me tell you why. Because when you have a kid that's throwing a tantrum, and I've seen this many times, right? When you have a kid that's throwing a tantrum, and then their parents are like, "Yeah, here, take this tablet, go have fun, and just leave me alone," right? That's gonna cause abandonment issues at some point. It's like I don't know if it's called abandonment issues, but it's like when your parents don't give you enough love, I guess, right? You become attached to
So
everything in life.
attachment issues.
Yeah, exactly, attachment issues, and I think we're gonna see a lot more of that
I think we're
coming up
gonna
in
see
the
a
next
lot more.
couple of years
We're gonna see a lot more
with the new
psychological
generations.
disorders in general. I think because it's this is not going to be healthy and it's not going to be sustainable for a very long time because I feel if you're going to be constantly stimulated by these dopamine hits, then what we're going to see is people will be unable to produce dopamine on their own, and then depression levels are going to start going up.
And
And we
then
already
yeah,
see this with depression, anxiety higher among teenagers nowadays
that's
than
true.
before.
That's true. Because before, um, like with technology, because we both grew up at a time when we did not own a phone at 13 years old, right? I think I got my first phone when I was 13,
Same. I think.
something or 14 or like that, something like that. And I remember when I got my first phone, it was very like bare bones, right? It didn't do anything. It just made phone calls and text messages, right? And it had like a game where you know you eat stuff with the the snake and the snake game, you know?
Snake. It's
Yeah,
called Snake.
it's called Snake. Yeah, that's the game. So it's yeah. Like there was nothing to do on the phone, so you'd hold the phone for the first time and you'd be like, wow, and then the novelty just wears off and you're like you put the phone down and then you go do something else. But now we've gotten to a point where your fucking laptop is a small 6-inch tablet in your hands. You can do anything with it. It's like why would you even go outside? Why would you?
Yeah, I saw this when I was teaching. I used to teach English to children with special needs, and one of the students that we had couldn't didn't have any motor skills, so they couldn't use their fingers properly because they didn't have like
Yeah.
Play-Doh or toys or whatever to play with when they were younger, because
Oh man.
had been spent. Their entire life had been spent as the main form of entertainment for them was a tablet. So they didn't learn how to bend their fingers. They would only know how to swipe.
Yeah, so they're not they didn't
Dexterous,
get
I think is the word.
enough
Yeah.
practice and stuff like that. So that yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah. So I saw that. This was how long ago was this? This was like 4 years ago, and it just really changed my whole perception of technology with children. Just trying to teach
I
this
think there
kid
needs
how
to
to
be
hold
an
a
age
pencil.
limit. I think there needs to be an age limit for when kids start using technology. And I don't think it's 13. Maybe it's a bit too much. But like, maybe at like 10 years of age you introduce them to something, but like you need to like make it timed. It's kind of like watching TV back when we had curfew on TV,
Mm.
you could only watch TV for 1 hour a day, that's max. It's the same thing. You can only play on your phone or tablet or PC or video game whatever for 1 hour a day. Like that I think that should be um like good enough and you gotta remember like these kids nowadays because we both went to school, right? We both sat in class for 8 hours, fucking just sitting there fidgeting waiting to get home until we can actually do something, right? So you are gonna take your kid to school and he's gonna stay in school for 9 hours and then he's gonna come back home and you expect him to be docile. Like that's not gonna
Yeah.
that's not gonna happen. So you're forced to give them technology. You're forced to give them the tablet. You're forced to give them the phone, and you're like, yeah, go play, have fun. When back in my day, we used to fucking play football with a Pepsi can. We used to like fucking because we were so poor. We used to just fucking, you know,
Crush
yeah,
a can and have a kickabout in the
Ex-
street.
yeah, exactly. But kids nowadays they don't get these things. They don't experience that, and that's kind of sad. They take every. It's kind of like you're born into a generation where you take everything that your ancestors worked really hard for granted. You know,
Yeah.
because you don't know. Like a kid born nowadays, he's not gonna know that this tablet didn't exist 20 years ago, right? He's not gonna know like because we see this transition from like kind of like this fucking technology boost that's been happening over the last 20 years. Like they can clone people right now. Like look where we fucking are. And it's not looking good.
It's not. I do agree with the take what our ancestors have given us for granted, but at the same time, this has been a common theme throughout history, right?
Yeah, but it's never been this fucking fast. Like, for example, my father and let's say someone 20 years older or younger than him, right? He can still sit down on a table with them and have a conversation, right? Right now, I'm 28 years old, and I'm seeing people who are 21, 22, 23-year-olds struggling to keep up a conversation with me. You see where I'm going with this? Like, my father, when he was 28 years old, he could be friends with someone who's 18. Like, the difference isn't really that much because back then, technology wasn't really moving fast. So, like, you're to 18, you're probably gonna get along with someone who's 28. You sit down and have a like beer or something, right?
Yeah.
Or can you do that nowadays? Can you sit down with an 18-year-old kid and just have a beer? I couldn't. I just get bored, right? I just can't.
So here's
I
the
punch
thing.
them in the face.
so so here's the thing, Jad. That is technology is one of the reasons for this, but the main underlying or overarching reason, in my opinion, is because of the speeding up of hobbies and interests and life, digital life, let's call it,
Yeah.
on social media and whatever. You're
The
going to be
cloud,
the cloud. Yes,
the interwebs.
you're going to be thrown into circles, and these circles are going to become very similar to echo chambers, where whatever
Exactly.
you
Yes,
say
yes. I love that word.
is
Oh my God,
going
yes.
to be thrown back at you by like-minded people. So when you're sitting with an 18-year-old, or let's say that it's 10 years of a difference, right?
10-year difference.
10-year difference. Their perception of the world is completely different to yours, and that's less. Well, now it's way more than it was. Let's say 50 years ago, when an 18-year-old and a 28-year-old had a lot of commonalities in their lives. But now, the difference between an 18-year-old and a 28-year-old is massive. There's entirely different spheres of influence that are drawing you in. So, as an 18-year-old, you might be drawn to a certain type of content creator, while 28-year-olds would be drawn to a different type, and
Yeah.
38-year-olds
Yeah,
might even
makes
be
sense.
less on technology. And then these content creators, they have so much power in what they say and what they do.
They influence.
They influence, yes. Like, I don't know. I don't. I don't get me started on Instagram influencers, please. But
That's kind of yeah.
that's a topic for another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you get these people that have a huge say, very much like celebrities, except these people didn't do shit to become celebrities. They just are attractive and sometimes have money, and sometimes they got money because they're attractive. And a lot of the time, their content is kind of shite.
Well, to be fair, I don't have Instagram, and I haven't used Instagram in like 6 years. So I'm not really knowledgeable about this whole celebrities on the internet. I just don't get it, right? It's not it's I don't have celebrity. I don't have fucking people I look up at and say, oh, I just want to be like that. No, I don't have that. Fuck that. Like, I'm my own person.
In the past, these were called role models, right? But nowadays,
True. I think it's still called role models.
But role models now is influencers and Instagram posters and people that really don't. The only reason they are your role model per se is because they're attractive and famous.
No.
In the,
I think
in the past, they had more skills.
No, that's not the problem. Problem is that right now people are void of father and mother. What do you call them? Not personalities, figures.
Okay.
So mostly father, right? It's mostly dads who like bail out on their kids most of the time. So these people grow up, and I don't mean bail as in like bail leave, no, but like they have to work all day and they don't get to see their kids, and you know how it is,
this
right?
This is from a traditional, assuming we're talking about traditional family households.
My parents were like that, right? My dad worked well, my mom worked too, but like it's kind of like he just worked all the time, right? He was never home, so he was trying to provide for us. So right now, because you would see that most people are missing this father or mother figure, right? So let's say someone who doesn't see his dad all the time, right? His dad has to like travel somewhere, and he just can't. He has to work and make money and whatever. So his dad is missing a father figure. So what does he do? He goes onto Instagram or YouTube. He clings on to these influencers that I like to call them, right? Some
people like Andrew Tate.
You could say, yeah, exactly. Like, let's say Andrew Tate. Now, I don't have a problem with Andrew Tate. I just think the way he talks is kind of stupid. But like, that's just me. That's just my opinion.
Nobody's perfect.
But like, yeah, Andrew Tate. Like, let's say a guy who did not grow up with a father figure, right? He's gonna go onto YouTube. He's gonna start watching Andrew Tate, and he's gonna be like, oh, well, I didn't have a dad, so maybe this guy can be my dad. And he starts learning from him. Like, that's how it works, right? Now, it could be good. It could be bad. Sometimes influencers are not good. Sometimes they're good. But see, when you're missing an authority that tells you, hey, watch this person. This person's good. He can teach you. But when you don't have that, you're just going to go into what you call echo chambers.
Yeah.
All right? It's like echo chambers. It's like whatever you Google, right? It's like, well, why are apples, if you Google why are apples bad? Guess what you're going to get in the first page. Yeah, why are apples bad? And there's just going to get fucking tons of articles explaining why apples are bad, even though we both know apples aren't bad. But it's because that's what you're looking for, and what you're looking for, you actually get sometimes.
No, that's true. All of this comes down to something called oh god, I forgot the technical term for it. But basically, the way you phrase a question, that influences the responses that you get. So if I ask, "Why are you stupid?" versus why did you do poorly in the test? You're going to get two different responses.
That's true.
Granted, the question is not identical, but even with identical questions that are just phrased differently, like since we brought up Andrew Tate, there was this one example that he gave where he basically said, instead of making the statement, men are physically stronger than women on average, he would go and say, women are weak. And yes, so both statements are correct, but one of them is going to get a huge negative backlash. well, the other.
Well, I don't think. See, that's the thing. Are women weak? They're weaker than men. But what defines strength, anyways?
And there's plenty of types of strength. If you want to go into this conversation, you got mental, physical, emotional strength.
True, but see, like I have a problem with saying like women are weak, right? Because if they're weak, we're comparing them to who exactly? Theirs or us men?
Yeah, so you need a frame of reference.
Exactly. So like when you say women are weak, like versus what? Like when you say women are weaker than men, I would be like, well, physically, I mean, sure, okay, I can agree with that. That's pretty like basic. You just look at it, right? Who's got bigger muscles? That's the strongest, right? It's just like, um, but to say something like, it's kind of like saying, it's kind of like saying all dogs are are docile. You know, like you can't say that.
Well, I'm not saying there aren't strong women, and I'm not saying that there aren't weak men. But
Actually, now that we're talking, I don't mean to like um uh, uh, mix women with dogs. That's not what my intention. It just came out this way. Anyways, go ahead, Ed.
well, thank you for clarifying that.
Of course, of course. I think in 2023 you have to clarify everything you say nowadays.
For fear of getting cancelled on our first podcast. So stay tuned, audience. We'll see what happens from here.
Yes, of course, of course.
In all seriousness, yeah, it's in behavioral economics. You do have something called like a frame of reference when you're talking about or
Of course.
getting results or
He knows this. He
asking
has to think.
questions.
Andrew Tate knows these things, but he just chooses to do this because I think when you trigger someone, that's when they actually remember you.
Yeah.
Think about it. Like if I make you angry right now, like right now, let's say I just called you up. It's like, hey Ed, what are you doing? Like I'm bored. All right, I'm coming up. We have a cup of coffee, and then I just fuck off and go sleep, right, or whatever. You're not gonna really remember this tomorrow. You're gonna be like, if I remind you, hey, remember what we did last time? Oh yeah, you came over and we had coffee, right? Okay. But let's say I came over here and slapped you as hard as I can on the face, and I just left. You're gonna remember it for the next a couple of days, right? You're not gonna forgive me, right? If you see me, you're gonna slap me back, and that's because I did something to you that I made sure, hey man, I did something to you that you're gonna remember, right? It's the same with this. You trigger people, you make them remember, shitty situations, I guess.
So I was with a friend yesterday, and we were talking about something very similar to this, where the way to get someone to remember you, it's either you make them feel something strong emotionally.
They either hate you or they love you.
Yeah, make them hate you or love you because that's how they remember you.
Exactly.
Because if you're going to be nice and passive and neutral, they're not going to really remember you. So in the context, audience, was we were talking about how to get women to be more attracted to you, and we're just talking about this in theory, but that's besides the point. So one of the things that my friend brought up was make incorrect assumptions because that will elicit an emotional response. Let me give you an example. If you see a blonde, blue-eyed Scandinavian woman, you can go up to her and say, "Oh, looks like you enjoy spicy food." Although in 90% of the time that is the incorrect assumption to make. 90% of the time you're going to get, "Oh no, I can't handle spicy food. What is this?" And then it triggers an emotional response in them, and that makes them more attracted to you.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously
That's
assumptions are
very
assumptions.
sleazy, but
It is very sleazy. It was in a book that he read. I forgot the name of the book. Or yeah, it was called Models: How to Attract Women with Honesty, or Attract Women with something along those lines. So
wait,
this is the book we were talking about.
A friend of yours was reading that book. Can they just like find a better book to read?
I don't know.
I don't know.
We can
something
ask
a bit
him.
more helpful for your soul. But
well,
yeah. Anyways, we're gonna take a small break and we'll be right back. Testing 1, 2, fucking 3. Welcome to the JadEd podcast. I'm your host Ed again. And hey, we're gonna talk about self-absorbed people.
Yes.
Right?
Nice shirt, by the way.
Oh, thanks, man. I had to change the other shirt because it was getting really hot.
Yes.
So I decided to wear black instead of white. That's gonna help. So self-absorbed people, like, obviously, bad parenting is gonna lead to lots of problems. kids, and especially when they grow up, they're gonna be very self-absorbed. They're not gonna have empathy towards people, right? Because they didn't really learn that through their parents. And I've had my fair share of fucking self-absorbed people, right? And it's easy to spot for me nowadays. What about you?
Yeah, I think everyone's dealt with self-absorbed people, and I think our viewers and listeners
Oh, of course.
also have dealt with a lot of these, and some of them may not know that they're self-absorbed, but
We
that's
could be self-absorbed ourselves.
yeah, definitely. I mean, two men recording a podcast talking about their own experiences. What's more self-absorbed than that?
That's true.
um, well, so I think parenting is a balancing act, right? Like when you're raising a kid, if you're going to give them everything, they're going to become self-absorbed because they believe that they can get anything they want whenever they want, and that's one end of the spectrum of bad parenting. And do you think there's another end? Do you think if parents are very neglectful of their children, I don't think that would cause children to become self-absorbed per se, but it would cause probably a lack of empathy, and that might be the other side of the coin with the other personality disorders that could be that could manifest in the child.
I think it all starts with that. We were talking about, like your kid is throwing a tantrum. You just give them a tablet, right? It's like so, like your kid. Let's say they're 5 years old, right? And they're throwing a tantrum. You're sitting somewhere in a restaurant, and your kid's like, I want this, I want this, I want to go home, I want to go to the zoo, I want to blah blah blah, whatever the fuck they're kids. So you give them the tablet. So what that signals to them is that every time they're bored, they ask for something, they receive it, right? So basically, oh, I'm bored right now. Oh, here's take this tablet, which means they're giving them this instant gratification instead of having the kids just stay there and just not move. Teach them that hey, right now you need to sit on this table and not move. Instead of that, they just give them what they want, and that just gives them entitlement, right? When you're a kid and when you every time you ask for something, you receive it, right? That's gonna teach you that when you grow up, it's gonna be like every time you ask for something, you're gonna expect to receive it.
I don't think that's the main issue here because the kid might be asking for something completely different and then you're giving them something else to raise their dopamine levels. So they become
I see.
reliant more on not the fact that they're getting anything they want. They become more reliant on technology to provide
Fill the
the
gap.
exactly to fill the gap, to give them what they were lacking or desiring, or at least substitute this feeling. Because if you're, let's say, you need, let's go back to diet, right? And say when you're feeling, sometimes you're like, oh, I'm craving sugar, I'm craving fat. Sometimes when you have been eating really poorly for a few days, this has happened to me multiple times. I'd have had almost no vegetables. I would be craving like, I don't know, a salad or roast veggies in the oven or something like that. And that's you're meant to have that as part of your balanced diet, but if we take that example and then we extrapolate it to, oh, a kid wants to go to the zoo. Oh no, you don't need to go to the zoo. You can have these.
You can see the animals.
Yeah, exactly. Like, while at the top of your fingertips, wow, that's a narwhal. I have not seen a You can't see narwhals in the fucking zoo.
Yeah, that's true.
You
I mean,
know.
there's good things and bad things about it, obviously.
Yeah, but the point here being is the craving that they're wanting to go out and explore is because when you're talking about food, you're not substituting the vegetables for pills that you're taking, right? Like, I mean, I would have a pill if it would stop me from eating, but that's just me.
Really?
I'm kind of fucked. Okay, but
You are.
but when it comes to actual real life experiences and substituting those with a tablet, that's just um a bad parenting,
Yeah, of course.
which is a whole topic. Yeah, but B,
Eat your vegetables
your vegetables kids. But B, it's also
and don't do drugs.
yeah. Oh, forgot where I was now. So yeah, it's bad parenting, and also it's bad practice the part of the child because
I don't.
you don't think the children are at fault anywhere here?
Sometimes they are, but I think because I've seen some really like behaved kids, right? And you don't see that all the time, but you do see it sometimes. When you do see it, you look at the parents and you talk to them for 5 minutes, and you're like, it makes sense. Makes sense that their kids are, chill and they don't knock things around like cats and what. Um,
I was a well-behaved kid.
well, I was slight. I was well behaved when I needed to be. I was not well behaved when I needed to not well behave. All right. So the whole thing with the kids, I don't think it's their fault. I think it's their most of the time. I think kids, like, you're born into your parents' house, and then for the next 3 years you're stuck with your parents, right? So you pick
Yeah.
up everything from. So I think really your kids are kind of like a reflection of who you are.
Well, that brings us to the nature vs nurture debate, and there's not really a debate here. The only debate, because both of them are important, the only
Of
debate
course.
here is what the percentages are for nature versus nurture. And most mainstream psychologists have agreed that it's around 50-50,
Okay.
perhaps 55% in favor of nurture. That's off the top of my head, but
I think it's more towards nurture.
yeah, 55%, between 50 and 55% it is towards nurture, and then 45% is nature. So yeah, so if a kid is behaving in a certain way, well, there's a 55% chance that it's because the parents did something fucked up to make them behave in a non.
True. And I actually, I don't believe it's just 55%. I think it's much more than that because now, if you've read a lot of books about history and bad people, right, you'd notice that most of the bad people did their bad things because they were placed in that situation, no more, no less. So I was reading a book by Hannah Arendt, right? She wrote a book about Henrik Eichmann, a Nazi officer who he basically killed a lot of Jews, right?
All right.
And then they took him to Israel for a trial, and they trialed him, and I think they hung him. And she, in her book, she explains like any one of us, you, me, anyone, our viewers watching, any one of us who would be placed in Eichmann's situation would do exactly what Eichmann did. So if you or me were in his situation, we'd probably go down the same path. That's what she was saying. And that's coming from a Jewish woman who fled the Holocaust. That took some balls to say something like that. She's like, he's not a bad person. He was just born into a situation that, that was the path.
Yeah.
So I don't believe it's nature versus. I don't believe nature has more. I think it's nurture, like maybe like 80% nurture.
No way, because what's what you're excluding here, nature versus nurture, is when the child's brain is developing, not when you have an entire system based on brainwashing the child. So, in the instance of Nazi Germany,
Everyone was brainwashed.
Exactly.
Of course.
Exactly. So there was a huge brainwashing operation to paint the Jews as the enemy, and the like. So that can't really be attributed to nurture, but what could be attributed is there's also
Isn't it?
no, because you can brainwash adults. You can brainwash. I mean, teenagers have already developed their own or are developing at least their own personality, and that's, I think, the point in their life where they want to be as far removed from their parents as possible, and they want to be against their parents. So then that's where nurture can have.
That happens like early teenage.
Exactly. So that's where nurture can have the opposite effect, where if let's say a father is uh, controlling, then the teen is going to want to be
Rebel.
Exactly. And then if the father is very lax when it comes to their parenting, then the child would want to go and look for discipline, maybe, or the teenager at least, and then maybe they would join some.
They would look for role models,
for example, as well. So that, and in that case, what nurture doesn't capture is so nurture should be direct parenting towards a child, but it doesn't capture the wider system that the child is born in and is growing up in.
No, of course not, because then he goes to school and then.
So then we're gonna tie this back to giving kids being hyperactive at home, and then the parents also trying to make them even more docile
That's true.
by giving
They
them
become ADHD.
the
That's how you become ADHD.
yeah, it's going to cause psychological disorders when you as a kid can't go out and play, and if you want to go out and play and the parents don't want to take you to the playground or
And
whatever, they give you a tablet instead.
combine that with you wanting to go home after school and like just desperately wanting to go home so you can like play something like Call of Duty or whatever the fuck you want to.
Yeah.
And then that causes even more problems because when you're sitting in school in class, all you can think about is going back home and playing your video game,
Yeah.
and which causes you to be fidgety all the time. I want the time to pass. You keep looking at the watch all the time. You're like, I want the time to pass so I can go home and play video games, and that just creates a generation of kids that don't have attention span. Their attention span is really weak, which brings me to my own experience with college right now. Like I just graduated, as I said before, and I'm meeting these kids that are 10, 9, 8 years younger than me, and they cannot look you in the face. Now, I don't know if that's a thing because of COVID, right? We had to sit at home for like 2 years, no interactions and stuff like that, even though we still went out. Let's just be.
Dude, COVID was a whole different thing for kids, right? Like imagine 3 years of as a child being cooped up, and then the only form of entertainment you have is a fucking tablet as well, on top of you not being able to go out and see your friends and play.
True. I
So-
mean, yeah, that is true. But that's
With teenagers, also it's stung because teenage years are some of the times in your life where you need to form a social life. It was easiest on adults. It was easiest on introverted gamers like myself.
Yeah, like us. Yeah.
But it was much harder on extroverted teenagers. Excuse me, extroverted teenagers, extroverted children, or any child in general. Even introverted children need to go out and touch grass from time to time.
That's true.
So,
We all do need to go out and touch grass at some.
but that has had an effect on disorders that children have been diagnosed with as a result of inadequate brain development due to being quarantined.
Let's wrap this up really quick. So what have we learned today? So I guess don't give technology to your kids. All right? At least
too early of
time
an
them.
age.
Just time them. Give them like maybe 30 minutes to an hour a day max. And then go have them do something else like touch grass, for example, you know? That's something we used to do before phones were a thing.
I would agree with everything you're saying. But the most ironic part is neither of us have kids, so we don't know how hard it is to be a parent.
Well, I think I'd be a better parent than most of the people out there.
Oh no, definitely. I agree with you. I agree with you. And on that note, viewers, thank you so much for watching and listening. I'm Ed.
This was the JadEd podcast.